The important part. Let's hear from our panelists. I'll stop talking. So we have 4 members of faculty here. Kakali Bhattacharya is with Educational Leadership. Cindy Debes is here from English. Kathleen Hoss-Cruz is from Food, Nutrition, Dietetics, and Health. They didn't make that easier, did they?
No, they did not. No, they did not.
And Suzanne Porath is from Curriculum and Instruction. So I'm going to turn it over to them and give them an opportunity to just share with you their experiences in doing discussions online, hiccups, challenges that they've had, and please feel free to ask any questions as we go along.
Paper, scissors.
I can start.
Okay.
My experience is fairly limited, and the courses I teach are capped at 20 students. So I don't have the large online classes that I know a lot of other people have in other fields, and they're kept small because it's an English class. So there's lots of papers, and discussion is a major goal of the course. It's one of the course learning objectives, is to interact with each other and demonstrate knowledge and awareness, but to work with creativity and imagination as well. So my discussions, I really want to encourage participation and freedom and experimentation with ideas and thought. And so I have assignments that set them up for working with the material and coming up with ideas. And then they have a discussion period where they have a number of different discussions over the different topics that they're managing with their groups. And then they culminate with a separate assignment that's sort of, call it an analysis somewhere, where they summarize their developing interpretation, referencing specifically points of the discussion that were instrumental in developing their ideas. So the assessment is primarily outside the discussion in terms of quality. And then they get scored primarily for engagement and participation in the discussion itself. So I'm not assessing so much the ideas that they come up with as much as that they're actually working and coming up with stuff no matter what it is. So that's my experience primarily with discussions.
I can go next.
They respond to each other.
Yes, that's part of the engagement. I tell them it's a discussion, it's not a Q&A, right? So students' initial reaction is to do that, to like have their first post sort of be like a mini paper over their amazing skills and qualities. And then as the course develops, that formality breaks down and they're like, hey guys, what does this tree mean? I don't get it, right? And then they have more productive discussions. But it takes them a little while to recognize that discussion requires more than one people interacting with each other and not just talking to me individually.
I have much larger courses. So a couple things that I do, I just basically made a list of my best practices is I don't have a discussion every week. I generally try to have one last for 2 weeks. And so they have to post that first initial post, but like the first Saturday, and by the second Saturday, they have to do all their follow-up. It makes your grading a lot easier. It's less of a burden on them, but they have said they tend to forget that they're in a discussion. So I haven't really found that happy medium between not too many and not enough. But from the grading end, it's a lot nicer to not have to grade that many. I do require them replies, so I use Cindy's online discussion guidelines. I basically beg, borrow, and steal everything I use. It's awesome. So the other thing I do is, because I have such my basic nutrition course runs, I think, 90 students in the online section. That's nothing compared to the on-campus section. So they initially kind of complained that 90 students in a single discussion board's a bit much. So I do break them out into discussion groups. They're together in the very first post and the very last post, and then they have smaller groups, and I mix them up after each exam.
How many are in the group?
I think it's anywhere from like 15 to 20. If you get them too small, there's not enough going on. But if they're too big, they're a little overwhelming. Canvas doesn't make it easy to follow those discussions though, because the instructor cannot join a group. And so you kind of have to, that's where my bad habit is not staying engaged in the student discussions. So if you break them out into groups, it's going to be even more challenging to stay engaged. but they tend to do better in a little bit smaller group. But the big bad habit I have is, like, again, just not being engaged in their discussion. And I'm in a class right now. I'm also a doctoral student. I'm taking a class right now where the instructor is not engaged in the discussions, and I haven't really heard from him at all the whole semester. So I just kind of feel, huh. So it is really important to be involved in your online discussion groups. And I'm still having trouble with grading, but don't we all? All right. I hope that. Any questions about that or anything you want me to add?
Where are you having trouble with grading?
I make these beautiful, big, detailed rubrics, and then I still can't figure out how I want to assess the student. That's kind of where.
Okay, so it's a philosophical problem,
Yes.
not
Yeah.
a technical.
No, not technical.
Okay.
Technical thing I got down, but it's more philosophical. Well, they're kind of here, but then they didn't do this, and I don't know if it should go here, and what really should I have them do because they're freshmen, and is this really too high of expectation? That whole thing. So.
One of the things I've worked with another faculty member in a large group like that to make it a little bit easier, you broke them up into groups, but even within the group, that 1 week there's posters and 1 week there's responders.
That's an idea.
And so you don't have
Yeah.
everybody doing quite as much. And so they know they will have to write something every 2 weeks.
I really like that idea. How do you keep track of that?
So you know how to split them into groups, and
Mm-hmm.
I let the students do it because they're adults. And say, split yourselves into A's and B's. The A's respond, or the A's post, B's respond, B's post, A's response.
Do you do that in lower level courses or upper level or all?
That was with lower. Yeah.
Sorry, I just find that too much independence really scares.
Well, also make sure that you're
Yeah.
you're posting on their assignments, because I mean they're really tied to what pops up on what their deadlines are, as an assignment. Or no, as a calendar post, not another assignment, because then it goes in the grade book.
So yeah, you can add those deadlines into your calendar without it being a full assignment.
Yeah, you have to do that with them because they get really confused. As Canvas says the due date is this, but really they have to post a week earlier. So the other thing I do is go into Gradebook and use that notification option for students that haven't done something yet.
There is such a thing?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
This is exactly what this is supposed to
Yeah,
be.
so you go into Gradebook, and if you go up, there's an assignment, and you kind of like hold your mouse over the assignment column, the top of the column, there's a drop down box, and you can click it, and it says notify students who, and you can pick that haven't turned in, that haven't been graded, that haven't whatever. So I will, and it sends them an actual, like a internal Canvas email. So I'll send them, especially in the lower level classes, I always, the day that first one is due, I'm like, you guys have, even though the due date says this, you guys have to turn your first post in today. And I don't know if that's helped or not, but I do it, so I feel better.
Do you want to go first?
I'm gonna derail things completely, so no.
Yeah, and then you have all these different options, but you can do this message students to. And then you have all these different options. And I just changed the subject to stuff.
So I teach doctoral students. So my group is a little bit similar to yours in terms of size. I get about 25 students that I teach, but I probably break all the rules that but I am known to be a rule breaker, so I do those things. So first, like, to set the tone of the class, I have, instead of an introductory video of me as an instructor, I have a video of a big idea of the class. And I borrowed Tolda's from Mike Wesh. He made a big idea video of his class. You know, what is the big idea video of what he's doing? So my big idea video introduces in very accessible way, because I teach research methods and qualitative inquiry. So my big idea videos introduce in a very accessible way what are the 4 broad learning objectives. But except for learning objectives, they are personified as superheroes. So then each module is their quest to get a superhero skill, you know, with the 4 superheroes. And each superhero has different characteristics. And because it has different characteristics, you know, in that module, they're mastering that skill. Now, because they're doctoral students and they kind of don't always follow deadlines very well, you know, but they're engaged. It's not because they're not engaged. They're engaged, but they're also managing many other things in their lives. So because that's my population, I feel like they need a little bit more flexibility with their deadline. So I don't always have a discussion board in a very traditional sense of a discussion board for two reasons. One, because it becomes very difficult to really meaningfully engage and manage your time well for all the other things I have to do as a faculty. You know, it becomes extremely time consuming. And sometimes in the past when I did it, you know, I was sometimes teaching individually each student, you know, so if I have 25 students, it was like teaching 25 classes in one semester. So I wanted to cut down on that, but I wanted to still have the students have an engaging online interaction with each other. So I do like two forms of online interaction with each other. Two forms of online interactions with each other that are discussion oriented. One is synchronous and one is asynchronous. So I'll talk about the asynchronous first, and then I'll talk about the synchronous one. So the asynchronous one is at the end of a module, they would have to, and Julie, you were in my class, you know how I did the golden nuggets at the end of my class. So at the end of my module, they have a space to talk about the golden nuggets of the module, like what stayed with them, what kind of questions are coming up for them. And I have not made anybody do a requirement of responding to each other, because I didn't want to go and count and grade. Did you respond? Did you not respond? I want to cut down my time, and I don't want them to think that I'm just making them do things that are just busy stuff. So I want to trigger some intrinsic motivation towards the content, you know, and if they're intrinsically motivated, they're engaged. So I ask them to do this golden nuggets. And because of the setup of online education, and especially my class where students sometimes feel extremely lost because they're learning a lot of new concepts for the same time, they're really curious to see what other taught. Mm-hmm. And then when they taught that, like, me too, like I've started a new wave of me too in my class, you know, and so then they engage with each other on their own without me telling them to engage, or without me counting and doing bean counting. I can't do bean counting. I'm too busy. They're too busy. I don't want them to have to count. I don't want to count myself. So that's what they end up doing. They respond to each other on their own if they want to. I said, it's if you're inspired to respond. If you don't. There is a participation grade, and I have a rubric for participation, and it's based on like engaged citizen of the class and moderately engaged. So I have a breakdown of what participation looks like, and they can interpret it. And I generally don't really go very hard on that. As long as they are somehow present in and engaging in some way, I'm okay with that, because then otherwise I get into like, is 5 posts engaged and 10 posts super engaged? I don't want to go into that. You know, as long as I feel like they're getting something out and they're contributing to something, you know, I'm okay with that. And so that has really worked out well. Students have not felt like they have their pressure to like, you know, engage each other in a certain way. And the other one I do is a mandatory synchronous meeting. I call them coffee chats. And that's where a lot of discussions happen in my classroom. And I have them at different times. So through the week, I would have like some lunch hour ones and some afternoon, evening ones. And basically they're about an hour, you know, and I would come and they would synchronously come. And the research on online literature shows that students want connection with the instructor, students want connection with the content, students want connection with themselves, like having some time to reflect on stuff, and then students want connection with each other. So these are like the 4 areas of connection they want to have. So what I do is I invite them, and the protocol is come to this discussion chat space with some questions. So I'm not doing lecturing and doing PowerPoint, because then it's like a big talking head. You know, and talking head stuff, people will zone you out and start clicking around and doing other things. So they do come. They tell me that it is possibly one of the most rewarding thing that they get, the synchronous chat. And you'd think that the people would be resistant to that, because a lot of people's conception of online is completely asynchronous. So I build in the synchronous model, and they come, and the fact that they get to see me and they get to ask me questions cuts down the feeling of not being engaged with your instructor, because then they see that I'm engaged with them and I'm willing to invest 3 hours of my week. So that 3-hour investment is a lot better for me to invest than to go into the discussion thread and continuously engage with people. I will engage, you know, I will respond back to them and all of that, but it's not necessarily to redirect conversation to continue a discussion. It's more to sort of, you know, give them some guidance on where their thinking is, what might they want to think more about, and that kind of stuff. So that, in a nutshell, is my discussion strategies.
Just shut him up. Go ahead.
So I'm coming here from a different space. We had Blackboard, so we didn't have quite the same things as Canvas. And one of the things that I've always looked at is, you've heard of the community of inquiry framework, the idea that in online learning, you need to develop social, cognitive, and teaching presence. And so the social presence is how much students know each other. Cognitive is how much they're engaged in the content. And then the teacher presence is how much do the students feel that the instructor is actually there. So one of the things I've looked at trying to do in many different ways is using more video, because media richness theory says that you know, face-to-face, it's very rich. We've got all of these cues that we're seeing, hearing, etc. But when you go to online discussions, it tends to be a much leaner medium. So I've been playing around with a lot of things, and the video feature within Canvas is difficult, shall we say, and unreliable. And so it's been something I've been playing around with. But last year I found not a program, a website called Flipgrid. Have any of you seen Flipgrid before? It's an online space, flipgrid.com. It's free. It's not an application. As educators, we get a free, what they call is a grid. And a grid is a discussion space. Under each grid, you can have as many topics as you want. And it works just like a traditional discussion board where you post a topic and then there's replies. And you can post as many topics as you want. However, the advantage to it is it's video based. And so with the free subscription, students can post up to 15 seconds or a minute and a half. If you pay them their $65 a year, you get more variety within that, but you can still do it with just a minute and a half, because a minute and a half is a really long time to talk without having somebody giving you feedback. So in my last class, I went back and forth between traditional discussion board and Flipgrid to see what the students thought about it. I also very intentionally crafted the types of things that I did on the discussion board versus the Flipgrid. The Flipgrid being video, and you can do it on any device, is really handy for showing processes, intentionality and voice, that type of thing. So I'm a literacy teacher. We talked about read alouds and how they would read aloud, but also they could show their classrooms and their personal spaces. So for introductions, I did Flipgrid because they could show who they were as a person. They did a read aloud, they showed their classrooms, and because I'm a geek, I decided to do some official research on it. And so I did some surveys and all that kind of good stuff. And when they compared the two spaces, they, on the Community of Inquiry Framework questionnaire, they didn't see anything different between the two spaces. But when they started actually talking about how the two spaces made them feel, the social presence was very much stronger in the Flipgrid, that they got to know each other as people. They saw each other's faces. And when you look at the actual discourse between the traditional discussion board and the Flipgrid, obviously the discussion boards are very formal. They wrote papers basically in response, where the Flipgrids, it was happening when the hurricanes were going on, and they were talking about those other personal things when they would start their posts. And so they got to know each other better through the Flipgrid than the online discussion board. One of the questions I asked them about in the survey was, do you prefer one or the other or both? And across the board, they all said they would prefer to have a combination of both, that sometimes it's good to have that traditional discussion board. And one of the things, they also felt more comfortable disagreeing with each other in the traditional, because they could think about and craft and recraft, where the Flipgrid, it did seem so much more personal. So with intentionality, both of these things are really good for very different things. Cognitive presence much stronger in the traditional, or social presence is much stronger in the Flipgrid.
How do you deal with like ADA compliance issues and student resistance to being filmed? Because that's kind of what I run into.
So Flipgrid will translate the video. It's not really great, but it will translate it. They have to click the little button that said they will. And if somebody didn't want to film, they could create a puppet.
Oh, okay. That's cool.
Did any of them do that?
It embeds in Canvas, and I use the exact same rubric for both spaces. That was basically part of what you had was initial posts were rich in discussion, and then they had to respond to other people. And I didn't put any time limits or word limits to it either. Master's course though.
Good point. Yeah, because that can make a big difference. The level of students that you're looking at.
Yeah.
Big difference. So I'm picking up a couple of things in what you all have shared. Concerns about engagement, showing your engagement with those discussion boards if you have large groups, and how much time it can take. So those are really critical things that I think all faculty struggle with, that you want to show students that you're reading, you know, and you're interacting and that you're aware of it, but you also have to be careful with your time, because you can get bogged down in these courses a lot. So one thing that I've suggested to some faculty is to, you know, your sort of weekly summary announcement email, however you do it, talk about what you read over the discussion boards. You know, kind of summarize what the discussion came to, or, you know, Tommy did a really great job here, and kind of track who you do that with so that you hit a variety of students throughout the semester. You know, and so, you know, everybody go back and read Tommy's post, because in a class of 90 students, not all your students are reading all the posts. They just can't, no more than you can. So I will definitely send everything with the community of inquiry. I have several resources on that. And the other thing I wanted to add was that Cindy's discussion information is up on our website, so I will make sure that I send that out to everybody who's come today. So she has several resources there, so I'll make sure that and send that out. So that can help manage your time, because you're not trying to really be in the discussion itself, but you're letting students know that you're there, you know, that you read it, that you're aware of how the discussion was. You do have to monitor just in case things get really off rail, or you have any issues of bullying or inappropriate comments. So you do have to kind of monitor that, and encourage students to let you know if they're seeing something that's making them uncomfortable, you know, to send you an email or something like that to help you catch it as fast as possible. It can happen sometimes. Hopefully our students are behaving appropriately, and hopefully, you know, our structure that we've set up can help develop that. And then another thing that I picked up on was, you know, how do you make it a part of grading? You know, is it an overall participation grade? It's definitely important that it be a part of grading in some way, or they just won't do it, especially at the lower levels. They just won't bother if they don't see the point value of it. So you have to work that in.
One of the things in the past when I had larger classes and I did the weekly summaries of things, what was very helpful is after round one, you know, I kept those summaries because it was similar for the next round of people that came up, you know. So I didn't have to just reinvent the wheel, because I knew what module one would be, and then I have a summary of this week's discussion or module one discussion. So what I would do is I would just save the summaries by semester when I taught the courses. And then I just pull from the previous course and say, this week we did this, this, and this. You guys did this really well. You might want to think about that. A lot of questions came up on this. And a lot of those times, those questions are very similar. As you know, students are often stuck in similar places. So that cut down a lot on my time to use those summary sheets for subsequent semesters.
The one thing I've been trying, and this is, it blows my mind that I can't manage to accomplish it every week, is literally to just set a timer for 30 minutes and just spend 30 minutes at the discussion board. and then done, like once a week, don't do anything else. And I still find that incredibly hard to do. So
You get pulled in.
well, no, it's not that I have no problem sticking to the 30 minutes. I have a problem starting it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
so-
There's just so much going on. Gotcha.
Yeah. So, but it actually works really well because you can get quite a bit done within that 30 minutes. And I have my TAs do the same thing. They sign up for a day, and I said, all you have to do is set a timer for 30 minutes. When you're done, you're done. And so they're in there. Usually somebody's usually in there every day in the lower level course. But if I just would do it, it would probably actually work really well.
Yeah, I keep a record as well of my discussion interactions. Again, I have smaller courses, and then I create small groups for those discussions I mentioned. So usually around 3 to 5 people, depending on who's in the class. And so for each week, I keep a log of who I respond to and what that response is. Is it a point of praise? Is it a point of pushing engagement? Is it, clarity? Like nobody can read this, right? So keeping track of that kind of interaction so that one, I interact with everybody fairly equally on the boards, but then also if I see recurring pattern, this person's struggling with engaging on this point, or this person gets frustrated with their classmates, right? So that gives me a point of reference to see improvement over the places. Plus then I can interact with those individual students saying, hey, the last couple of weeks I've seen these kinds of things coming up. Let's talk about symbolism some more, that kind of stuff. So I do keep track of that for assessment purposes, but also just in terms of making sure I'm not singling anybody out for any one purpose.
Other questions? Yeah.
I have a question. When I set up discussion boards, I have where people cannot view other posts before they post their own, so they're not influenced by other people's views of the course materials. And every semester I have 1 or 2 people who will post a period and then delete it so they can then see it because they posted something, and then I say, one time warning, next time academic dishonesty or something. So I'm trying to cut that down. And is there any strategies to encourage people to follow the rules?
You
even
can
though
stop them from deleting their posts.
You can.
Is that some more options?
Yeah, it's
Setting.
more options under your settings.
More.
Sorry, I just totally cut you
No,
off.
that's
But
fine.
yeah, you can stop them from doing it. I let my students delete their own posts, and I really haven't had that being too much of an issue. But that's what I would do if I was having that issue, was stop them from deleting their own posts.
I think you could also address it within your expectations,
Yeah.
saying, this is why I don't want you to see other people's posts.
Discussion board expectations is like a page on my syllabus. It grows. Over
It
time.
does. And do they actually read it?
I don't know. They
That's
have
always
to
the
acknowledge.
question.
I have a thing where the first week they have to type that they acknowledge the syllabus, abide by the policies, have read it, and then they type their name. So I can always refer back and say, no, you agree to it.
You could always set up a quiz. Do you do any, like a quiz after your introductory materials and kind of stuff?
I haven't done that.
I think your contract is another way of doing it.
Okay.
But yeah, that could be a quiz question. You understand that you
Yeah.
cannot,
What are the consequences?
I've
for
had students
deleting
argue about their, they want to know my philosophy and why I do that, and it's easy to explain. But
Right.
I've had people say, like, I'm going to drop your class and switch sections. Be my guest. I don't know what the other person does, but they might do that too.
In my class, I want them to read each other's posts all the time, so I don't have very many of those situations where they can't see what other people post first. I'd rather they actually read
But
them
it
more
depends
than
on
they
the
do a lot of the
context.
time.
Mhm.
yes.
Yeah, because if mine did, they'd all do the same thing. So I have to block them from being able to see beforehand.
Any other questions?
What has been something that's really worked for you guys?
I do similar, I do a video like at the end of the week based on their discussion post. So instead of typing back in, I typically will do just a real quick video.
And seeing your face. And,
Your video.
Yeah, I have in my class, I do a weekly email back to everybody, but the assignment that I have the students reflect on is similar to what, instead of me going and telling them all, this is what I picked up from your discussions, they tell me what they picked up from discussion. Sort of flips that responsibility.
This isn't my idea, it's Anne's who's on the screen, but I co-taught with her a couple years ago, and then I tried it this semester with the co-instructor where we make a spreadsheet of every student in the class, and during that first week when they do their introduction post, we have like their name, their location, if they work in higher ed or not, you know, what their career goals or academic goals are, and then something interesting about them, like they love dogs or whatever, and then we can refer back to it and incorporate more personal things into our grading.
How's Fluffy?
Yeah. It does help
Nicknames.
because it's,
Yeah.
I mean, we had 37 at the beginning of the semester, and for a grad level class, it's pretty complicated to follow all these people who live, people in other countries this semester. So.
And Dr. Larson does something similar to that, and she requires that in that initial introductory post that they all post a picture that is not their profile picture, so that you've got another sense of them.
We start out our basic nutrition class by doing, well, I've been doing all videos lately, and I actually need to get away from that. But the first one is they have to show us their food environment. So I start out and I do my own home, and here's my fridge, and here's my kitchen, and here's my grocery stores, and I do this whole video of different things. And some of my one of my TAs is from Jordan, and so he has like some pictures of traditional Jordanian food and things like that. So they will do that. They'll show their like gardens and their the parts of their houses where they do their food. And I thought that was pretty cool. That we just try to keep, or they at least have to show some pictures. If they're not comfortable showing their faces, they at least have to show pictures of their food environment, and that's worked out really well.
Yeah, I love having it tied to the course objectives and the course content. Just right from the beginning to get them to start engaging with what is this class and how is it different from all the other
But then
classes.
I forget everything about them, which is why I like that Excel file idea, because I cannot ever remember that.
Go back to that discussion.
Yeah.
And scroll through
Yeah, and I
remember
never do.
those.
So
Yeah,
I do like that
yeah,
idea.
that's a good idea. So, guys saying that she uses Screencast-O-Matic to do feedback in intro videos. Of course, we have Zoom. What are other tools that people have used or like using?
Or intro videos.
Well, yeah, or just screen capture or anything like that.
Well, that's one place Canvas I think does do well in the videos for the feedback.
Yeah.
Underneath, if you embed the rubric, you can either do an audio, a video, or you can do an audio translated and then go back and fix it.
Yeah, yeah. For feedback, I think
That does really well.
that works for discussions, and then for assignments, of course, within SpeedGrader, you can do that audio, video feedback as well. So those are definitely good. For recording videos outside of the feedback format. Of course, we want to encourage Zoom and MediaSite, but a lot of people have found useful, free, or limited license options out there, Camtasia and Screencast-O-Matic, and so there are a lot of different tools out there. I will put a poll out there for our efforts for closed captioning, is that if you create those things, pull it back into MediaSite if you can, because we're really struggling to figure out exactly how much video content we have out there, what's being used, and what is actually captioned. So that's been tricky. A lot of people are definitely using YouTube and using that auto captioning and hopefully correcting the auto captioning, because it can get pretty terrible. But making sure that we're in compliance with that accessibility pieces.
Well, that's why I stopped posting. Well, I don't record lectures in general, but they always say use video. Well, I don't, because technically I'm supposed to get it captioned, and I sent you an email with all the steps, and it was like this easy 17-step process to get your captions into YouTube. So I've been using, it's a program called Nearpod. It's similar to Top Hat, but it's a long story why I'm using Nearpod instead of Top Hat, and there's nothing to do with it. Nearpod, Nearpod.
Okay.
And they have this self-paced lesson option. So I use it in my on-campus course, and I have all my lecture notes and everything. And so I create a self-paced lesson in Nearpod for the online students. And it's basically my discussion slides, but then like they click next and there's a question and answer. It's kind of the same thing that the on-campus students do, you know, live on their mobile devices in class, but then I'll have like a nice explanation that would follow. This is what I, you know, literally told the students. This is almost like my lecture notes so that they can read them. And then, because a lot of them really wanted to have a recorded classroom, and I don't teach that way. I move around. I can't be standing at a podium.
So how's it different than just setting up a regular module?
It's just the live class instead. It's the live class instead of they have a module, they have a reading, they have a quiz, but they just at least the online students I have, which are especially in my upper level course, they're very dietitian. They're all dietitian majors and they're very high functioning type A. I have to have as much information as possible. I don't want to miss anything. So they want that. They want everything that comes from what the on-campus students get in terms of like lecture. And so I started putting those online as when they started asking for the recorded lectures. And I was like, well, that's not how I teach. And I'm not going to caption them.
These videos?
They're not
So
videos.
Nearpod isn't video. Yeah, it's like very, very enhanced PowerPoint.
Yeah,
you know.
That's all it is really a PowerPoint system. And I use it in, it's an audience response system. And I use it in class because students can follow along on their devices. So if students have trouble seeing the board, everything's right on their device and they can answer questions live. And then Nearpod's self-paced lessons are set up so the students can actually answer questions as well, more or less live. But they go at their own pace and they move through the lesson on their own. And they quote it back to me when I get something wrong on a quiz and they want to defend their answer. So they're obviously paying attention to them.
Good. Yeah, definitely more powerful than just posting the PowerPoint slides that you used in class, or really, you know, just recording your 60-minute course. You know, students aren't going to watch 60 minutes.
Yeah, and I do put my PowerPoint slides into Nearpod, but I add an extra. Another page after that said that, or I'll put the slide notes like right in there so they can read everything I told the class.
Yeah, because we say a lot more than our PowerPoint slides have, right?
I've done short content stuff, but I try to keep it between 5 to 7 minutes. And I've been told that that's even long for our attention span. And I teach doctoral students, and they too have an attention span of a gnat, you know. So it's very like they want it quickly. They want, you know, robust content very quickly. So I do, and I'm lucky because I get to work with. I get a grant usually for converting some of these courses online. So I usually get a Global Campus grant, and our college has a videographer. So I can take my content to the person and I can have my videos done, but then sometimes I have a floating head, sometimes it's voiceover, but there's all sorts of visuals in there, and it's a 5 to 7 minute highly produced content video, and students really appreciate that.
That's nice.
Yeah. And then they're also hosted in YouTube. So even if they leave the class, they can still access the videos.
Actually, you weren't the teacher, it was Dr. Redcorn, but I did take your class. And her video style inspired me to, over the summer, if I get the Global Campus Development Grant, plug applied, I will actually want to go around and interview my own faculty, you know, and I'm going to use like iPhone, it's nothing fancy, but just because I thought that was so cool to hear from other faculty in qualitative research about what was going on. And so I was like, you know, I have a basic course for trying to recruit students into my major. I should be showing them all the different cool things that we can do with nutrition at K-State. So that's my goal for the summer. That and have it in Spanish.
And I think there's a balance because, like what Kathleen was saying, there are students out there that say, I want to see the video lecture. I want to see that I'm getting exactly what the student on campus is getting, which that's nice, but so many of the students won't watch that 60-minute video. So how do you balance that, and how do you close caption something that's 60 minutes long, and all of those kinds of pieces? So it's, you know, if you have a student who's saying that, or you have a degree that's really focused on that, how do you help them move to the next level in online education and really capture the essence of the lesson rather than the full lecture that you would do in person? It's tricky.
And I even had the experience when my classes, I would do kind of like the weekly video summaries. I'd post it on our homepage. It was right there when they log in. And because I could see who was reading it, watching it, they weren't watching them. The students weren't even bothering to watch the videos. And it takes so much effort, even just to do a quick little capture, to even, you know, get a transcript or caption it, to put them in. I was like, so if you guys aren't watching these, why am I doing it, right? And so I asked them, and they said, yeah, they don't care. And so I stopped doing it. So the whole, they want the video, maybe not always.
Yeah,
Maybe
it's a
not
balance.
always.
It's a balance.
For short little things that I need to instruct, I've sometimes used PowToons.
Mhm.
I
Those
love
are fun.
PowToons. Yeah.
I love that.
More cartoonish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like 2 minutes is tops, because otherwise the
Yes.
music drives you crazy.
Yeah, the music's horrible.
They use